Mets Talk Live, we keep it raw. Sipping on Henny, we breaking the law. Queens represent, bitches know the name. New York Mets, we bringing the flame. So raise your glass, here's to the Mets. Ballin' harder than the rest, no regrets. City feel rockin', the vibe's electric. Ain't no stopping us, we getting hectic. Riding with the crew, we do it right. Mets in our soul, we ballin' all night. Queens to the core, we bringing the ruckus. Shout out to the fans, we live in the touch. Playoff dreams, we stacking the wins. Mets Talk Live, let the madness begin.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Mets Talk Live right here on the channel. And I do apologize for the background. I had the topics, had the background, all the graphics and stuff like that. But unfortunately, StreamYard is not letting me download it into their little portal there. So we get just a big old face of me and a lot of conversations about what has been going on around the league, what's going on around with the New York Mets, and the very latest that I actually posted a video about 45 minutes ago in regards to Pete Alonso and the New York Mets. And the good news, I guess, is that everybody can just hate the Dodgers at this point, as if you haven't seen, the Dodgers signed Tanner Scott to a 4-year, $72 million deal. And there's a $20 million signing bonus, a $20 million deferred money. So the rich get richer. And for anybody who doesn't think the Dodgers are a problem, you got to understand. And yes, and me and Heck were talking about it on Twitter. We were going back and forth. Some of you might have actually seen the comments going back and forth. Is that, yes, directly in the big scope of things, everybody's under the same rules, right? Everybody follows the same rules, right? Every team can do what the Dodgers can do. But we all know that Major League Baseball will never get involved like they did with Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen bought the team, and they were so petrified of him that they put a tax that is named after him, right? There is something going on with the Dodgers. There is something going on with the Japanese players, and don't tell me it's just demographic. There's something going on. There's some under-the-table type of deal with these Japanese players that if the Dodgers have a spot for these guys, and if it's just that simple. Like California, last time I checked, has multiple teams. So why is it always the Dodgers? The Dodgers didn't even have the most quote unquote IAF money to offer Sasaki. So it was the Blue Jays. The Padres actually had a little bit more. So there's something going on there. And supposedly there's an investigation in regards with the Dodgers and Sasaki where there's a little bit of something going on there. And then on top of that, all the deferred money, and nobody can tell me that, yeah, it's quote unquote in the rules and it's within the rules, but come on, guys, like we can all understand what's going on here, right? And I brought this up to Hector. If you don't follow me and Heck on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, just remember that we are on there, and a lot of our conversations are on there when we're not on a show. MLB always has a team that is untouchable, right? In the dynasty years of the Yankees into most of the 2000s to 2010, the Yankees were MLB's, babies. They were their darlings. The Yankees were untouchable. No matter what they did, bad, good, or ugly, Major League Baseball would always have their back. And that's the way it seems like the Dodgers have taken that role as that new team with Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball. Like it started with the Ohtani situation where, again, this only started last year. This wasn't something that's been going on for 10 years, right? This started last year with the tremendous amount of money being deferred in the Ohtani contract. And yeah, it's part of the luxury tax, so to speak, but there's a lot of things that even if a team wanted to do it, right? It's just a matter of, we knew the Dodgers were always the team Ohtani was going to. What was the reason, right? There's other California teams, right? It's not like, he could have went to the Padres, could have went a little southern, a little more south to California, could have went to the Dodgers, right? He was already with the Angels, right? So it's not like it's further away from Japan. Like demographic is the biggest embarrassment to when people make that argument. It's just not true. No, Carlos, I'm not, because listen, it comes down to two teams here. right? The Yankees have no competition in the American League, and the Dodgers, with everything they're doing over the last 2 off seasons, are clearly the favorite in the National League, let alone baseball. But again, as high as you are, the further you can fall. And the Dodgers better win, because if they don't win, that's more embarrassing than what MLB is doing and allowing all of this, because it is an issue and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it, because we all know, and I brought this up to Hector as well, if Steve Cohen was doing this, Major League Baseball would have stepped in already, right? I appreciate the Dodgers getting their guys and spending the money, right? Every fan base would want their team, their owner, to do that. But this started last year with the Ohtani contract. It's just a fact. It has nothing to do with the overall situation with the Dodgers. If this was the Padres, whatever team would have stepped into this role and been what they would have been doing, it would have been an issue to most fans. Right? It's clear. I'm sorry. It's not just demographic. It really isn't. Right? You got Blake Snell, who is a Padre. You had Tanner Scott, who is a Padre, goes over to, I mean, you're basically LeBron James at this point, and jump ship to go to a super team. That's what you're doing, because you can't beat them, so you might as well join them. Right? That's how it seemingly is, right? It's amazing to me that the Steve Cohen tax was purposely put there by MLB and most of the owners in baseball because they were scared of Steve Cohen. Yet, underneath the rug, underneath the table, when nobody was paying attention, the Dodgers were going to do just that. And that's the funny thing here, right? Because it will be interesting, because here's the other thing that nobody wants to talk about, right? All that deferred money that they're giving all these players, they got to have the money in a bank available to be able to defer that money. That's law. That is SEC law. That is just union rules. That is all the rules that you have to worry about. They got to have that money in a bank. So what does this do that nobody wants to talk about? That deferred money that is just sitting in the bank is collecting interest. So what does that mean? That means the Dodgers are still getting richer. The Dodgers are still making money off of that money that they're deferred, that is sitting in a bank to give guys 20 years from now. Like, nobody's talking about that. Nobody is talking about that. But again, and no matter who the team is, and there's teams that I hate more than the Dodgers, but the Dodgers are the team that's doing it right now. But we all know, and again, if you're a Dodger fan, and I see Maniac in here right now, right? If Steve Cohen was doing this in the Mets, you and many others would have been crying and would have been complaining because of that fact. And it's an issue. And again, this isn't about, because look, the Mets payroll is high, the Yankees payroll is high, the Phillies payroll is high, the Padres payroll is high. Like, you got a lot of high payrolls, right? It's not the fact of the high payroll, right? I believe their payroll right now is at like 370 or something like that. So they're over the Steve Cohen tax, right? They're going to pay that tax. But again, it's more of the situation where clearly with these Japanese players, there's some type of under the table deal that's been going on ever since they got Ohtani. And it has been clear, right? It was a way with Yamamoto to get more and more money using the Yankees and the Mets, knowing he was going to the Dodgers the whole time. The Sasaki situation technically wasn't about money, but it also made the Dodgers get a little bit more IAF money during that process, knowing that he was probably going to the Dodgers all along. So that's the issue. The fact is that there's something going on, and nobody's. I'm not going to say nothing's going on yet, but we know MLB is not going to do nothing about that, because as of the late 90s with the Dynasty Yankees and into the 2000s, the Yankees was MLB's baby. because they had the international free agents. They had the Japanese player in Matsui and all that during that time as well in the later 2000s, right? Had that guy. So it was beneficial for MLB to have that market with the Yankees that was already a global brand, right? The Dodgers wasn't necessarily a global brand until Ohtani came along. Like, you could talk about Hideo Nomo all you want, right? Nobody was wearing Dodger hats in Japan as they are now. There was more Angels hats in Japan than there was Dodger hats. Just like anywhere you go around the world, you see Yankee hats. Why? Because it was a global brand. The Dodgers have become that. So MLB is not going to disrupt their global market with anything the Dodgers do, right? I can go back to the mid-2000s when A-Rod was this close to getting traded to the Red Sox. MLB came in, blocked it, knowing that the Yankees were going to step in. And then they made that trade. Why is that? Because A-Rod to the Red Sox wouldn't have shaken the foundation of Major League Baseball, but what it would do is shake the darlings of MLB, and that was the New York Yankees, who is still the global brand. Even though the Yankees are still the global brand, the Dodgers are kind of above them now when it comes to that, right? Go around the country. Just go around the country, go around the world. You're going to see a lot of Dodger hats like you always used to see Yankee hats. It's just a fact. So it is crazy to me that it's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I'd love to see another team. The homie, we can sell out. We don't need the Dodgers to. We're not the Pirates. All right, we're not Miami. Right? That's not the issue. But again, homie, you just made the point that I'm saying. The global enterprise in Major League Baseball now is the Dodgers. It's not the Yankees anymore like it was in the late 90s into the most of 2000s, probably into like 2010, 11, 12, I'll say 2000 to 2015. So they had about a 20, 25 year head start in the global market. And then getting Matsui, that was a huge deal. You know, and that's one thing as well. So that helped. But again, once the Yankees pivoted, you know, when Matsui retired, you know, the Dodgers kind of took over that role. Again, go to Japan. When Ohtani was an Angel, all you saw was Angels hats and Ohtani Angel jerseys. Now you probably can't find an Angels hat. You probably can't even find a Yankees hat in Japan. But a Dodger hat you will. And again, that money and that international market is surrounded by MLB right now. And Rob Manfred knows that. Why do you think how quickly MLB could not wait to, quote unquote, investigate Ohtani in that gambling situation? Said, oh, no, he had nothing to do with it. I don't care how rich you are. You can understand that $60 million is missing from your account. All right. At some point. Right. And he didn't say anything. Come on. Like, it's kind of silly. Hold on. Let's see. Let me just check the comments, guys. 1 second. Well, Sanders, I'm not even talking about the competitive part, right? Because I kill teams that never go and pay any money and continue to take the revenue sharing from other teams, and the luxury tax goes to the other teams that have lower payrolls, and the owners pocket the money. But again, there is no rule for owners not to pocket money in the collective bargaining agreement or Major League Baseball. So the owners can pocket the money because the rules say there's no rule to say they can't. That's the issue. That's why when people are talking about there should be a salary floor, I agree with. I don't think there should be a salary cap, right? Because that does hurt a lot of teams, including the Mets, by the way. But there should be a salary floor. There really needs to be a salary floor because a team like the Miami Marlins hasn't spent a penny this year in this offseason. Yet they're probably going to rake in more money from other teams that went over the luxury tax and the revenue sharing than their actual payroll and probably all the money they're going to make throughout the year. That's a problem. So, yeah, JD, again, we know how the FBI is in cahoots with all these major corporations. Right? When was the FBI actually took down a major corporation or a major franchise? What was it? Enron? With the SEC? You know what I'm saying? So, like, the FBI is not going to take down large organizations that make a ton of money, that pay a ton of taxes, not just teams, but just the organization, MLB itself, as an entity, pays billions in taxes, right? That all relates to everything. You really think the FBI is in control of what they do with investigations? They needed a fall guy. The easiest guy was his interpreter. That was with him a lot. Like, that's a fact. Yeah, and that's the other thing, Paul. Like, MLB, listen, major corporations, right? We talk about this with politicians all the time, how they have hands in every cookie jar somewhere, right? No matter who you are, the right or the left side, doesn't matter. They all have their hands in cookie jars that protects them and their closest friends or companies. Like, we all know this, right? This is part of the country. We all know that. Like, that's a fact. So you have to understand that the FBI, yeah, quote unquote, it's a private entity, and it's not, directly has a boss, so to speak, except for a director. Like, the FBI doesn't have to listen to the president. They don't have to listen to, anybody in power. They don't have to. They're a private entity. Even though they're government jobs and government, employees, they still are a private entity. So again, and I'm sorry, if it was that in depth of an investigation, what was it, a couple of weeks? I'm sorry, there was much more than that. And who knows how long he has been doing this. But again, they needed a fall guy. The easiest guy was the interpreter. And I can assure you, if you find the interpreter's family, they're probably very well paid off and very okay wherever they are, probably Japan. So it's like, Joel, it is a government agency, but it also is run independently where nobody can tell them what to do. President can't tell the FBI to do this. He can request it, but they don't have to do that. That's the fact. I'm not QAnon. I'm not anything left, right, center. Doesn't matter, right? I'm just telling you that the FBI investigated what? It took them, 2 weeks to say, oh, no, Otani had nothing to do with it? Come on. How does the person that has no control over your account, that is basically not a family member, an interpreter, has access to that much money and nobody throws up a red flag? The bank, anybody. Like, kind of weird. So let's get beyond that and talk about our New York Mets. As everybody's so excited to talk about the Mets. As we know, Tanner Scott went to the Dodgers, 4 years, $72 million. The Mets did sign AJ Minter, which is a really good addition to the bullpen. It's definitely going to be the bridge guy to Edwin Diaz. That is a good move within itself. That does include, obviously, Buto, Nunez, Garrett as well, which is very nice. It's a good start. I think the Mets are going to get one, maybe even two more bullpen arms. And, there was a lot of talk about, and if I had my topics available, which I can't, because, Ken, I understand that, but the Dodgers officially didn't really have a closer. So Scott got the closer money and can be a closer. Like, we just assume that everybody just wants to come to the Mets or other teams, right? Scott might have had no interest in coming to the Mets unless the Mets overpaid. Like, that's a possibility. So, but again, Kirby Yates is the guy that has been bantied about a little bit in connection with the New York Mets. That would be an awesome signing as well. I mean, if you can have Kirby Yates, if you can have Minter and Diaz, And you still got Nunez, you still got Buto, you still got Garrett. That's really damn good. And you can bring in a Stanek as well. I mean, that's a pretty damn good bullpen. I mean, that can be easily a top 5 bullpen in baseball, no problem. Bite, that's true too. But even last year, a lot went down when it came to, the Dodgers had a lot of injuries, and they made the right trades, and they still won a World Series. So they can have all the injuries they want. There's no doubt that the Dodgers will go at the trade deadline and get who they need. Like, that's one thing that I love about the Dodgers, that my own team and our team, the New York Mets, seem like they never do enough at the trade deadline. That's my biggest gripe when it comes to the Mets, not just Stearns or Cohen. This is going on during the Wilpons. This is going on during Alderson and Epler, all those guys. Like, it has been an issue, and I've talked about that, where they do just enough in the offseason where you're like, okay, I'm pretty confident. And then when you realize the problems that they could have, fixed via the offseason with trades or free agency, now they need it at the deadline. And it's 10 years now. The last time the Mets actually made a big trade at the deadline was Yoenis Cespedes. And again, even that wasn't enough to win a World Series. And, I go back to 2022, they didn't do enough. Go back to last year, they didn't do enough, right? Go back to 07, 08, go back to those years, even 06 for that matter. They needed certain things. Their starting pitcher wasn't there. They could have went and got a starting pitcher, and they didn't do that either. They're so afraid to give up their prospects that they never do enough at the deadline when they have the opportunity to do that just for money in the offseason to better their team and their positions of need, and they don't do that. That is the biggest issue. Just give me – Chris just messaged me saying, I told you it would be a 4-year deal for Scott. Just give me 1 second. I just want to just text back Chris. Just want to see if he wants to hop on really quick. I'll send them the link. But yeah, guys, like that's the biggest issue that yeah, John, that's funny with the MLB and the DraftKings. That's good. Rotation, yeah. I mean, the Dodgers do it. I mean, it's no mistake in that. Yeah, but again, we know baseball isn't basketball, right? Like, basketball, you got the 2 or 3 biggest stars. You're probably going to win the championship. Like, that's real, right? Baseball is such a different game that you don't have to be the best team to win it all, right? You don't even have the biggest stars to win it all, right? I mean, you don't need to. And again, that doesn't say that. Look, we all know the Dodgers are going to be favorites, right? It's just a fact. So, and yes, Storm exactly 16 as well, right? You go into 2015, you finish 2015 making the World Series. You clearly didn't have enough, right? We know the pitching rotation would have been fine because of the young kids, but you brought back Yoenis Cespedes to shut up the fans that were complaining to bring back Cespedes, and the Wilpons, who, even though we hated them, they weren't stupid. They realized, oh, if we get back Yoenis Cespedes, the fans will shut up and won't bother us. And that's exactly what happened. And they did nothing else. And what do you think was going to happen? They needed so much at the deadline. They were getting James Loney because of Lucas Duda injury. Like, there was so much to that. Like, they could have done more, but they didn't because they didn't want to. Like, that's the issue. And it's continuing to be the situation. So that is the biggest problem that I've always had with the organization, with the Mets. Like, it's just a fact. Like, I'm annoyed at that, and I've always been annoyed at that as I voiced my opinion since I started this channel, that this has been the biggest issue throughout the Mets over the last for my history with the New York Mets, which was mid-90s when I really started to pick up on baseball when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. Right? I was really getting into it during Generation K, right? And then, obviously the Bobby Valentine years, and was really when I really got into it. And I grew up with the black jerseys and all that stuff, right? Even then, right? I talked about 2000. A great year by Mike Hampton, got to the World Series, lost to the Yankees. What did they do in 2001 to replace Mike Hampton? Kevin Appier, and basically did nothing else. Like, it goes on back for so many years. Give me a year the Mets made the playoffs, and tell me the following year, that offseason, they went for it and added to a team that just made the World Series or went to the NLCS like they did last year. You don't see that. They don't do that. The Dodgers just won the World Series. They got Snell. They got Sasaki. They got Tanner Scott. They brought back Teoscar Hernandez. Like, I mean, that's crazy. Like, that's the thing. So, and Chris can't, but I saw him in the chat, but that's okay. So, like, that's the issue. And that is the problem that I always had. That's why I get upset that the Mets don't do enough in the offseason. Yoshi Shinjo. Oh, God. What about Kaz Matsui? How about that one? That was a good one. The Roberto Alomar, the Jeremy Brunitz Mo Vaughn years. Like, those were considered good moves. I mean, it didn't work out, but it's like, come on, like, Roberto Alomar was an MVP the year before, and then he comes to the Mets and he forgets how to play baseball. But again, there's so many different things, guys, and Lounge, I don't know, man. Like that's the thing, right? Unfortunately, for the rest of baseball, the Dodgers are a global factor to MLB. They make so much money globally, let's just say in the Asian market alone, that MLB is not going to touch the Dodgers the same way when the Yankees was the global team of Major League Baseball. The Asian market, the Latin American market, like, it was so big. Like, you could went anywhere around the country or anywhere around the world, walk around whatever country, you would find a Yankee hat. Walk anywhere in Asia, you're going to find Dodger hats. The same way you did when the Ohtani went to the Angels. You saw Angels hats everywhere. We all know that when the Angels played the Mets and Ohtani was still on them, how many Japanese people were there with Angels hats and Ohtani jerseys? Right? The Angels play the Mets at Citi Field now. You think any Angel hats are going to be around? Probably not. Like, that's why it's so important to MLB. They're trying to go global. Have we paid attention to the London series? Like that's a big deal. They're trying to get global. Asia's a huge market. Look at opening day. Guess who the Dodgers are playing? The Cubs. In Japan. Like that, it's perfect. It's a perfect setup. You think MLB is going to come in and really investigate what they're doing? No. What, you got Sasaki, the phenom from Japan? Great. Yamamoto, who's a phenom from Japan? Ohtani, the biggest player ever to come out of Japan? No. Well, there you go. That's the thing. That's the unfortunate part. Like, we know this. Everybody knows it. Some might want to disagree just to disagree. And we could talk about, all the teams have the same rules. We know it's not true. We've seen it in the past. When the Yankees were MLB's, best thing since sliced bread, they blocked a trade with A-Rod with the Red Sox for no reason. There was no reason for it. But everybody knew that A-Rod was, like, the Yankees wanted him too. And obviously, when the Red Sox were so close to getting A-Rod, you knew the Yankees were going to jump in. And MLB knew that. What's better than the Red Sox to A-Rod, which isn't going to, make the foundation of baseball shake. It's not the Red Sox and A-Rod. It's the Yankees and A-Rod. That's a big deal. Talk about the Latin American market. Like that's the thing. So again, it is. I mean, just look, right? If people are talking about NFL and Patrick Mahomes, everybody was talking about the referees and how he got every call. Yet you watch the Lions game, and what happened? Goff got face planted, helmet to helmet, not a flag. Pro sports teams have their teams that they will never touch. Not only is it Patrick Mahomes, not only does Kansas City has a chance to three-peat, but it's never been done in NFL history, Taylor Swift is clearly a global icon, right? She just had an Everest tour last year. She is probably one of the biggest known singers around the world. She's at every Kansas City game. In the playoffs, you don't think fans of Taylor Swift are going to watch it just to see her face twice or three times or four times? NFL ain't touching that. That, like, it's so in our faces. And we saw it during the playoffs with the Dodgers, where it was the Dodgers announcer that was the national broadcast for the National League. Right? We all talked about that. We all know. We don't forget that. We all talked about that. Right? MLB could have hired anybody. There's so many qualified guys. Why do they do a Dodger announcer? Why? Because it's the face and the voice that everybody knows in Japan, around the world, that listens to Dodger baseball. Like, that's a fact. That matters. You really think that wasn't thought about in the MLB offices when they were deciding who's going to be the national broadcaster for the National League national shows for the playoffs? We all knew. Like, we all knew. So that's the issue. All right, let me see. And the other thing too, that again, it's not illegal, but remember, California went back on the issue with the Ohtani deferred money, because then it won't get taxed as much as California would tax them. You know, obviously, if it was $70 million per year for Ohtani, he would get taxed to the high heavens of California. But if it's only $2 million, it's a lot less, and a lot less on the bracket of taxes. So it's crazy. It really is, but it is special treatment. You can go to any league, right? NHL, Sidney Crosby, for years with the Pittsburgh Penguins, years, would get every call. He would high stick. I've seen it so many times against the Rangers, let alone the Islanders and many other teams. But he can do anything. He can cross check guys in the back, no call. A little finger push, and it's 2 minutes for roughing if it's Sidney Crosby. We all seen that. The famous line for many Ranger fans is "Screw the Ranger button." If you're a Ranger fan, you know how much the NHL despised the Rangers for years. But Sidney Crosby, right? Go to the NBA. It's been LeBron James. I mean, you breathe on LeBron James, you're getting a foul. Like, it's what it is, and what it was when LeBron was completely in his prime. It was set up for him to be successful no matter what, because he's a global icon. Like, that is crazy. Yeah, Jordan before. It was all Chicago. Like, it was the same, you know, and that's the thing. Like, I appreciate the fact, and this is coming from the heart. I love the fact that teams go for the player and get them, right? That's why I'm frustrated with my team. I'm not going to lie about that. Like, I am. I spoke my concerns about the rotation. I don't like how they're going about their rotation. I don't like how they're, picking and choosing what type of money to give where. And it kind of, I'm not going to say penny pinching, but they have a market value for a player and they're not going above that. Like, that's the way Stearns has been working. And that's a fact. We all know Juan Soto had nothing to do with David Stearns. That was Steve Cohen. Now, again, people talked about David Stearns penny pinching last year, and we got the Game 6 of the NLCS. But getting to Game 6 of the NLCS, you were that close. You were 2 games away to making the World Series. You were 6 games altogether to win the World Series. Get better. Like, I just don't understand that. Now we can have a conversation about Pete Alonso if the Mets can, if it's bad that they don't have him or not have him, whatever, right? Pete Alonso can, the Mets can have Pete Alonso and they'll be fine. But I think they also be fine without Pete Alonso, depending on what they do. But again, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to the New York Mets, and we'll get into this a little bit. I think one of my coworkers wrote, Wayne, if you're still here, again, you see how many people are in the chat. I gotta find you. But Wayne's talked about, what did he say? I don't know. You guys probably seen it, but my coworker, he wrote, the Asian doesn't care for the Dodgers. There you go. And by the way, Wayne's Asian. I'm not saying anything bad. He is Asian. But yeah, but that's the thing, right? When it comes to the New York Mets, as we just jump away from the Dodgers for now. The Mets in their history, I'm not going to say 80s history. I grew up, again, I told you, mid-90s, where I really got into baseball. I was young, but I started to love the Mets, pay attention to the Mets. Ever since then, like, again, Yoenis Cespedes was the biggest trade that the Mets probably ever made at the deadline that shocked everybody because the Mets never do it. And then, and it goes back to, again, 06, NLCS. We know what happened in Game 7. What did they do in 07 and 08, right? One of those years, they got Tom Glavine. Like, they never did enough in the offseason to counteract what they already were, what they accomplished the year before, and make their team better to get over that hump. That's the issue. So, like, that's the problem that I keep on having with this team. And again, I'm not saying the Mets can't win 90 games, right? They won 89 games with, the worst year in Pete Alonso's career, a bad year from Brandon Nimmo. Their bullpen in shambles for most of the year. Their rotation was Manaea and basically David Peterson and the occasional Quintana start. Like, there was a lot of issues with the Mets, and they still found a way to win 89 games. But why don't you want to improve on that mark? And not hope on hope, basically, and hope for a gimmick of ONG and Grimace and Haktua and all this nonsense, right? It's cute, but 2015 was a surprise. It wasn't a year where the Mets were ready and they were one of the favorites to win the World Series, like top 3 favorites. They weren't. They were in transition. Most people had them at 75 wins. Same thing like 2015. If you go back to 2015, that was supposed to be the transition year, the year to get ready for 2016, when all the young arms are supposed to come up. And 2016 was supposed to be the year. Go back to 5 days in Flushing when they talk about spring training. They were talking about 2016, excuse me. Same thing like last year in the offseason of 2023. What were they saying? Oh, it's a transition year. We're going to evaluate a lot of guys, but 2024 is going to be the year for us. Yet things change because shocking things happen for the New York Mets. And 2015 made the World Series. Last year made the NLCS, and they didn't do much more the year after in free agency or in the offseason in trades or free agency to make your team that much better. Like that is the concern that I keep on having. And we're not asking for much, right? We were asking for a top line starter. We were asking to get Corbin Burns, get a Max Fried, trade for a Luis Castillo, trade for another starting pitcher that is top line starter. A lot of people say, bring back Pete Alonso, and you got Juan Soto. A lot of people wouldn't have complained. I tell you right now, if we got Burns, if we were to re-sign Pete Alonso, already have Juan Soto and sign AJ Minter, let's say if they sign Stanek and another pitcher for the bullpen, a lot of people wouldn't complain. It would be a very solid offseason. But as of right now, we got Sean Manaea coming back. We replaced Severino with Montas. We signed a reliever in Clay Holmes that we're trying to make a starter. David Peterson's coming off a really good year, but how are we going to know if he's going to, match that or be close to that? Like, we don't know that. Like, there's guys still out there that the Mets can make their team better, right? Bring back Pete Alonso, great. But is that a difference? Or, in the lineup, you just added Juan Soto, which is big. But you can do more, right? The Dodgers don't care about positions. They've moved Mookie Betts 47 times ever since they traded for him. Why? Because every time they saw a player they wanted, they got, regardless of position. They figured out a way to play these guys. That's why when people are like, oh, why do you need another outfielder in Anthony Santander? You know why? Because he can play elsewhere. Put him somewhere. That's why. Because he's a better bat than what you're telling me you're going to give me. Same thing with Alex Bregman. You could do a lot worse than Alex Bregman. You could do a lot worse than Pete Alonso for that matter. Like, you get Juan Soto in here, and you haven't touched the lineup for the most part. Winker. That's not going to rattle any cages. Well, King Stu, I'm not going to say that they were, and let me just start putting up the comments so people understand what I'm talking about here. I do apologize for that. And again, I apologize for the background. For some reason, I couldn't download my backgrounds into the StreamYard portal. It just wasn't working for me. So I'm rolling with no topics and no background and graphics and all that, except for just a steady background that I was already downloaded. But yeah, I'm not going to say they're worse off than last year because we don't know that, right? We haven't played the games yet, right? I guarantee you, King Stu, you probably think the Mets would have won 75 games last year with the roster they put on the field on opening day. Like, we got a little bit excited about the JD Martinez late spring training signing, but other than that, it still wasn't going to be a good enough team. Most people thought, right? So I'm not gonna say that because it's not fair to a Mets team that most Met fans didn't give a chance to last year, right? So I'm not going to say they're worse because as of right now, you're bringing back Sean Manaea, who pitched like an ace last year. Even though I'm not throwing Sean Manaea as an ace, but I'm just saying that's what we have at the moment, right? David Peterson had a great year last year. Even if he's close to that, that's great for us. That's probably better than what anybody else gave us last year other than Manaea, right? And then you talk about Montas, Clay Holmes, David, Kodai Senga for that matter, right? But if you're talking about just lineup, what did the Mets lose? They added Juan Soto at this moment to replace Pete Alonso. I think we can all agree that's a better replacement for Pete Alonso. There's not many that can replace Pete Alonso's production, regardless of how you think of the production in a matter of, runners in scoring position and late inning performances and clutch performances. Soto does that. He's been proven to do that throughout his career. So if you're going to just replace one player for another, Juan Soto replaced Pete Alonso. So you can't tell me the lineup isn't better when you replace a better hitter than Pete Alonso. And then you talk about Lindor. You talk about you have the hopes of Nimmo being healthier and being better than what he was last year. You got Vientos coming off a really good season. You hope Alvarez has a backup, a bounce back year, which even if he gets a little bit better than last year, it's better than what he did last year, right? There's potential with either McNeil and Acuna at second base, right? McNeil, it's very hard for him to have a worse season than he did last year when you saw him have better second half after the All-Star break before he got hurt. Like, there's potential there to be a better lineup. But again, there's no reason why the Mets can't do more. Like, that's the issue. Like, I can care less about – that's why I said, if you want to go get Bregman, you want to put Vientos to first base, I don't care. You find guys – like, you're not putting Vientos in a place he never played before. He's played first base enough in the minor leagues. He was a big guy. You don't think throughout his high school, college years, he played a lot of first base? He was a big guy. Big guys usually didn't play third base. So he played a lot of first base throughout his college, high school career, including in the minor leagues for the New York Mets. So you can do that. The same thing with Anthony Santander. Right now, why can't you DH Nimmo to keep him healthy and keep him off the field and put Santander in left field? You can do that. Why does it seem like the Dodgers can do that and everybody's okay with it, but when the Mets do it, how can you do that? Like, it's silly. And Robert, yeah, the Mets are interested in Flaherty and Profar. And again, those are fine. Look, I have no problem. You get Flaherty in this rotation. That's a solid move. I'm not gonna say great move, but that's a solid move. Because that pushes somebody out of the rotation. Thank God. Like, I don't have to see Tyler McGill or Griffin Cannon as a sixth starter. Right? You could do a lot worse than Flaherty. And that pushes everybody back. Right? You could put Flaherty as your number 3 or your number 4 with Peterson in front of them, with Kodai Senga and Minaya leading the rotation. And then you have Clay Holmes at the back end. Like, that's okay. Like, I would be okay with that. Jurickson Profar isn't the guy I want. I'd rather have Anthony Santander. I like the switch hitter. I like the better power. I like the guy who has 1,100 OPS in clutch situations in late innings. Like, but Profar is a solid player. Like, he can play multiple outfield. He can play all over the field, basically. He could play some infield. He could play from outfield. He could probably give you 18 to 20 home runs. Not the end of the world. And Ant, I know I know Profar is your guy too. Chris was talking about it as well. But again, we understand that, right? We know the Mets can get better. It's just a matter of what I always concern myself with this organization, no matter who's running it, is that I feel like they never do enough in the offseason when guys are available. And then when the roster spots that they filled with lesser players doesn't work out, and now they have to go out to the trade deadline to get a bat or a rotation arm. It's hard to get now because now less teams are willing to trade their guys because of the third wild card. A lot of teams, including the Mets last year, were still in it, where the Mets and a lot of other teams that were right in that area didn't want to trade because they thought they were still in the wild card. So that means less teams are going to be trading those players that are hot commodities. That means more teams are going to try to get that guy, which involves more competition. And you might have to give up more prospects because of that competition. Where now in the offseason, you might not have 6 teams involved in that same player. Maybe 2 or 3, but not 6. It might be easier to get that guy. And let's talk about the free agents. It's only money. So Lowndes, they're not at the max yet. They still got about, I would say about $30 to $40 million before they hit that third luxury tax. So the money's there. And again, it is possible that Steve Cohen doesn't want to go over the luxury tax in the offseason because he wants to have that available to go at the trade deadline. But again, that philosophy is hard to do when there's a possibility, like, let's say the Mets don't get another rotation arm, right? Let's say they go with what they have. They get a couple of bullpen pieces and whoever the other bat is. Let's say if it's Profar, or let's say Pete Alonso comes back. Let's just say that. They get Pete Alonso back. There's your lineup. Great. Winker and Marte is your platoon DH. You get through the most of the season. The rotation isn't as good as you thought it would be, or most of us thought it would be. Now they need a rotation arm. They need a solid to well above average rotation arm. That's going to cost you. But it's going to be less teams trading those guys, and you hope the starter that you might want, that team is actually out of it. Because if they're not, they might not trade them. Let's say if the Mets need a bat. And that one bat that they want is going to cost a lot more because other teams want them. But you can do that with either money or make a trade now that's probably going to cost you less. Like, that's the issue. Like, that's what I don't understand. I agree. I think waiting for the deadline is foolish. It really is. You should go into the season confident in your team. Now, maybe Stearns is confident in his team, but I find it hard to believe that he can believe that. If he is, then there's something wrong with him. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I want to have less questions going into opening day because, can I ask anybody this right now? Let's say Kodai Senga is actually healthy. He gets through spring training. No problem. He's still healthy. Who's your 8? Who's pitching opening day? Some are going to say Minaya. Some are going to say Senga. Right? You know why? Because the Mets don't have a true ace. That's why. Like, that's why. And some people can say, oh, well, you don't really need an ace. You know, like after the opening day, it's kind of like, well, every 5th day, these guys are going to pitch anyway. Yeah, sure. But when you need that stopper, when you know the guy, like if I do a poll, and you know what? I'm going to do this after the stream. I'm going to do a poll. Do you believe Sean Manaea can have an ace-like season like he did last year for the full year, not until starting June 1st? And I'm talking about a full year where he gives you ace-like performances. I'm not saying every day because, of course, you know, there's going to be bad starts every now and then. Even great pitchers have bad starts. But let's say from the beginning of the year until the postseason, he doesn't break down because he threw too many innings, which why aces matter. You want guys that are not going to break down in the postseason because they pitched too many innings, like Manaea did. He clearly was tired in that last game against the Dodgers. Right? I give him all the credit in the world. I'm not blaming Sean Manaea. It's your body gave up on you. You can't change that. Right? If you played sports, you know when your body can't do it anymore. Right? How do we know Kodai Senga could be great to start the season? But what about August and September when he's getting to that 150, 160 inning mark later in the year and you really need him to pitch well? Right? And he's breaking down because he hasn't pitched that many innings and his body's tired. His arm can't handle it. Right? Why do you think Quintana was so successful later in the year? He was one of our better pitchers. In the playoff, he was the guy that I wanted on the mound. You know why? Because he's used to pitching 150, 60, 70 innings. You know he wasn't going to break down. Severino broke down. Manaea broke down. Like that's what we're talking about here. That's why you need that guy that is the ace of a staff, that is a workhorse. A guy that you know on September 30th, when you need a game to win, you're going to say, damn, he might be tired. He might be breaking down. No, because they've done it before. Year after year after year. That's why when people talk about Luis Castillo and like, oh, he's not a great pitcher. It's not always just about a guy that's going to give you a 2.5 ERA. I'll take a guy that gives me a 3.2, 3.3 ERA, but can give me 175 innings because I know he's not going to break down in September and October. Like, that's the idea here, right? Are we trying to win a championship, or are we trying to, you know, have a couple of golf claps and a couple of gimmicks and be proud of the season? We lost last year, if nobody forgot. Met fans act like we won last year. That annoys the hell out of me. Carlos, yeah, that's understandable. But you did make the NLCS. You did. With all the roster moves that had to happen because the Mets had a ton of free agents. Why do the Mets have a ton of free agents? Let's go back to 2023 offseason, because David Stearns and Steve Cohen talked about it would be a transition year. So they set themselves up for a transition year, knowing that a lot of these guys had opt-outs or their free agent period time was coming. in their last year of their deals. They were giving themselves options. And mostly it was because they wanted guys that were on expiring contracts and have an opt-out so they can trade them at the deadline. That was the whole idea. To trade these guys, get a ton of prospects, improve your farm system tremendously, and then go into this season with a lot of possibilities. But because they made the playoffs, made that run, it set themselves up for, wow, we had success. So the Met fans aren't going to get so much on our backs because, well, we made the postseason last year. And we have a lot of roster spots to fill because of the decision that David Stearns and Steve Cohen made of making it a transition year and not going after the big fish that might have been in free agency or making that big trade. Like, that's what's the issue. That's the problem. All right, hold on. Carlos, I'm not saying that I'm not trusting David Stearns, but when you do it only for 1 year, and again, nobody can tell me that the Mets aren't going into this season at this moment. Again, let's say they bring back Alonso. Let's say the rotation is what it is, and they get a couple more bullpen arms, 2 more arms, whoever they might be, even if they're really good arms. You can't say that you're confident in the majority of the team. Because I don't care what anybody says. The rotation as a whole is question marks. Minaya hasn't pitched that many innings in 4 or 5 years as he did last year. And not only do we need him to throw that many innings again, we need him to be just as good. Where's that guarantee? Kodai Senga didn't pitch last year. So don't tell me you're confident in him just to remain healthy, let alone pitch good. David Peterson had a great year last year, coming off hip injury, pitched a lot of innings coming off of that hip surgery. Why do we just assume he's going to bounce back and do what he did last year or close to it, or not as good, but a little bit worse, but still good? Frankie Montas hasn't been good in 2 years. Now, I think Montas will be better, but you're hoping for that. We have no idea what Clay Holmes is going to be as a starter. He's pitched, 6 games in his life as a starter in Pittsburgh, and then got traded to the Yankees and then became a closer and a reliever? So where's the confidence? If you're confident in anybody, now I'm not saying you have no confidence in Sean Manaea, because I think he earned that respect. But there's no guarantee when Burns. Like, I don't like Cole, but Cole's gonna, if he's healthy, gonna give you 175, 180, 185 innings. You know that. Carlos, no, it ain't. But the way the Mets are working here, it looks like the rotation is done. Let's say it is, and I'm giving you the rest of the roster. You want me to name guys? Okay, the rotation's done. Right? I feel like that's a possibility. I think that's a strong possibility. Let's say the Mets sign back Alonso. So, again, that's pretty damn good in lineup, right? That's fine. Let's say the Mets get Kirby Yates and Stanek, or Kirby Yates and Robertson. Pretty good bullpen, right? I think we can say that the lineup's pretty damn good and the bullpen's pretty damn good. Now, the biggest question mark is going to be the rotation. And when me and Chris have our season preview and we make our own lineups, we make our rotation, and who would be the ace, second, third, whatever. We'll talk about the team, and then we'll give our win total. Right? The rotation is a big factor, huge factor. Right? When the lineup and the bullpen was a disaster for the first 2.5 months of the season, the starting pitching was pretty good, but we weren't winning games because of the other 2 parts of the roster being problems. Why can't that be the problem this year where the rotation is the biggest problem? We're scoring 7 runs a game, but we're giving up 8 runs. Like, it's possible. But there is no need to have question marks going into a season where positions that were available in the free agent market alone, and I'm not saying to sign Burns and Fried and sign Soto and Santander and Alonso, bring in Tanner Scott and AJ Minter and Kirby Yates. But you could have brought Burns in here with Manaea, and then you have a pretty good 1-2, regardless of what 3, 4, 5, 6 might be. The bullpen, I think, is still going to be okay. Well, it's not about being a hater though. It's about what has happened. Again, people don't want to hear it. Pinterest, that wasn't true because he was on the verge of signing with, I believe it was an Eastern, I think it was an AL East team. It might have been Toronto. Yeah, it was almost Toronto, but then something with his family was the reason why he made that decision. Again, I'm not saying he would have came to New York, but again, there was other guys out there that were perfect. Like Max Fried came to New York. No? Why couldn't the Mets do that? I'm not saying Max Fried is the end-all be-all, but he's better than everybody else the Mets have. Like that's the issue. Like it's not about hating Stearns. The proof is in the pudding. The issue with some Mets, and you see it on X, and right now we're seeing it on the chat, like it's a hate club for David Stearns. It's not. The facts are the facts. Nobody can say that we didn't get lucky last year. That was a fact. When you had a down season from Pete Alonso, a down season from Nimmo, and Vientos and Lindor basically carried the team with Manaea, when the bullpen was in shambles for most of the year, like that was a lot of luck involved. Like, let's make no two mistakes about it. Remember, we were this close from missing the playoffs. Like, that was an issue. Like, we forget that, but let's just take a look for a second, right? Let's talk about that really quick. And that's the thing. Like when I say that 2022 Mets roster was better than the 2015 Mets roster, people kill me saying, "Well, one went to the World Series." That doesn't mean they were a better roster. Why do you need hopes, lucks, and gimmicks to make a run? You don't need that. That doesn't happen often. And in the Mets case, it happens every 10 years. Like, that's a problem. It's stupid. Like, it's so silly to me. It really is. Let me just double check one thing. All right. Remember, Arizona collapsed at the end of the year for the Mets to have a chance to win a wild card, right? That's not the Mets' fault, right? Arizona basically collapsed. Arizona basically coughed up the third wild card to us. That was a fact. We all know that, right? That's a fact, right? You give credit for the Mets because they had to win the games they needed. But if it wasn't for Arizona, what did they lose? 2 out of 3 in the last series when the Mets were losing games in Milwaukee and hung on for dear life for one of them, and then still had to play that series in Atlanta. You admit, and I agree, and that's a factual statement for Stearns. That's not a hateful comment or a hater for Stearns. Stearns doesn't like giving long-term deals, but sometimes you have to bite the bullet. Like, Stearns didn't have to worry about that in Milwaukee because he developed Corbin Burns and Woodruff. Like, it's true. They already had aces within their system. And again, can they do that with Brandon Sproat? Absolutely. But he's not here yet. like that again, that relies on hope of a prospect. Again, that's the problem, guys. Like, this is not hateful statements or, the leader of the hate club for Stearns. It's not. But when there's guys out there and you have roster spots available for that specific need, you go get it. Like, you overpay for somebody you really need. That's what happens. Like, that's the thing. Let me just check a couple of things out. I'm just checking the comments, guys. Give me a second. All right, I just wanted to check the comments. Well, exactly, right? There's no need to gamble. Like, again, I'm not saying get every single guy on the top of the list in every position. I mean, it's okay for the Dodgers to do that, but I'm just saying, like, you could have got a Burns or a Fried. Now, again, the Mets can still trade for a starting pitcher, a Luis Castillo or something like that, or a Dylan Cease. It's still possible, right? It's just the offseason is not over. I know that can happen. But I have no problem walking back my words if he does it. But again, David Stearns has not been willing to give up prospects yet in anything. There was talks about Garrett Crochet, right? The Mets were in it, but never came close. There was some guys he wasn't willing to give up. I understand that, but you weren't even a finalist. So that tells me, how far did you really go? Vladimir Guerrero Jr., that's still on the table too. Could that be a possibility? Sure. But we're acting like David Stearns has done this before, and we're talking out of our asses here. He has not. I don't care if you don't like giving up prospects. But to contend, to make those moves that you need at times, and this is including the trade deadline, the Mets don't do it. They just don't. They rarely ever do it, regardless of who's in control. Cohen, Wilpons, Epler, Alderson, Stearns, doesn't matter. That is the biggest issue. SS, but there were starters to be had. That's the problem. Like, that's the issue. Let's not act like Burns and Fried weren't free agents for the Mets as well. Fried went to the Yankees. There was no reason why you couldn't take him from the Braves and keep him in the NL East on your team. And look, was 8 years an overpay? Yeah, but guess what happened? The Yankees targeted a guy after they lost Juan Soto, and they got their guy to keep him away from the Red Sox. Like, I don't believe the Mets would do that. Like, in my opinion, if the Atlanta Braves, let's say if the Atlanta Braves pick a guy, let's say Anthony Santander or Alex Bregman, whatever. I mean, they don't need him, but I'm just saying, let's say if Vladimir Guerrero was an option for the Atlanta Braves. The Braves need a first baseman, the Mets need a first baseman. Am I going to tell you that I feel confident that David Stearns would make sure he gets Vladimir Guerrero Jr. so he doesn't go to the Braves? I don't necessarily agree with that. I wouldn't be confident in that. SS, of course there's trades to be had. There's always trades to be had. Seattle Mariners are still looking to shed payroll. Last we heard, the price for Castillo is high, but he can be had. Dylan Cease, with a lot of information and a lot of sources that are out there, that the Padres are looking to shed some payroll as well. It can be done. You have to be willing to give up to get. Like, that's the problem. No, Mike C., this is the show where Met fans actually speak the truth, but nobody wants to hear it. That's the problem. Yeah, exactly. Montgomery as well, which I don't know if they're going to do that anymore. Like, I mean, they could. But again, that's the issue. Like, when people were talking about, oh, you're a hater with Stearns, you're talking shit about the Mets. Why do I want to talk shit about the Mets? I'm a diehard Mets fan. I love this team. Unfortunately, I live or die with this team, just like a lot of you. The fact of the matter is, it's a fact. You don't want to hear the facts, or you're trying to block it from your existence because you don't agree with it. Or maybe you do agree with it, but you don't actually want to see what it is. But then when the Mets happen to do what they did last year in the first couple of months of the season, everybody blames Stearns. Everybody blames some of the players, right? You started to complain. So if you're not complaining now about the lack of movement the Mets are making when they need those positions there's needs of that position, don't give me any nonsense, because this is the problem with Met fans. This is the biggest problem with Met fans. And I do apologize with the 2 super chats, CD and Juan. I apologize. StreamYard's killing me right now. I finally got to him. So let me just give CD. It was early on in the stream. I lost respect for the players who run to the Dodgers now. Where is their competitive spirit? I mean, I'm not going to blame them. It's not like they didn't get money, right? They got paid. They didn't take discounts. I know deferred money, but they didn't take discounts. But CD, I understand your frustration. I get it. But they didn't take less money to go there. They got paid their market value. Just because of the deferred money doesn't mean they didn't get their money. They got it. So the Dodgers aren't giving them, 10 cents to the dollar. They're getting their market value. So that's, I wouldn't say they're running to competitive spirit. I mean, sure. I mean, Tanner Scott's still got to go on the mound and strike out guys, right? Blake Snell, same thing. Roki Sasaki, same thing. Juan with the other super chat, Rob. Honestly, I'm questioning if the Mets even serious about competing or Cohen making more money. We got to. I don't think it's about Steve Cohen trying to make more money. I think he's perfectly fine. I believe him when he says, he didn't take this enterprise on to just make money. Like, of course, winning brings you money. Steve Cohen knows that. If you start winning, money's going to come your way. Like, that's a fact. Let's see. We got to make a decision, make a trade, or sign good players, and Sturge does neither. Well, at the moment, he's not, right? But that's the frustration factor. And thank you for the super chat, guys. Like, that's the thing. Like, we just got to the NLCS last year, right? That's a fact. The other fact is, throughout Mets history for many years, and especially since I've been a fan, this is not a lie, this is facts. You guys know this. The years after great years where they made runs and they were this close, the following year, they half-assed the offseason, said that there was a deadline to get it, and then they don't do it. How badly did they need a bat in 2022? They couldn't get anybody else. Anybody else would have been better. A bad back JD Martinez or Josh Bell would have been 100 times better than Vogelback and Darren Ruff. Nobody can tell me otherwise. Now, I'm not saying that JD Martinez or Josh Bell would have been the difference maker, but they're clearly better bats than what we got. That's the issue. Last year, because it was supposed to be an evaluation year, David Stearns wasn't willing to give up anything of importance in our farm system to get the starting pitcher we actually needed. What if Blake Snell was in our rotation in the playoffs? Would have made a difference? How about even a Jack Flaherty? How about somebody else that's a pretty damn good starter? Maybe that would have helped win another game against the Dodgers. Maybe not. But to not do it, you'll never know. It's just, that's the issue. That is the issue. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but when there's something of obvious need, go get it. Don't get Paul Blackburn and tell me he's going to make the difference when, even if he was healthy, he probably wouldn't have made a start until the NLCS. Like, that's a fact. And that's not even a guarantee. And the Mets were so desperate which was obvious for starting pitching, they used a Kodai Senga who's pitched 6 innings this year in the playoffs multiple times. So they clearly needed it, but they didn't want to give up anything. So you end up getting a Paul Blackburn who wasn't going to make a difference in the playoffs and had to desperately use Kodai Senga because the only one you trusted at the moment was Minaya and Quintana. Quintana couldn't go deep in games, and Minaya was on his last he was on empty. Like, we got to stop acting like they've done enough. Like, that is a factor. That is a problem. This is not being a hater. These are facts. Just because you don't want to hear it and then complain in the middle of the season when the Mets are having the problems because of certain things they could have done in the offseason, and now we have to hope to get it at the deadline. Who's confident they're going to do that at the deadline? They never do it. And listen, I'd be the first to come on here if they do it and tell you I was wrong and shut me the hell up. Me and Chris talked about this all last year during our pregame shows, postgame shows, our roundtable shows, everything. We kept on telling you, we have no problem eating our words when they actually do it. If they don't do it, they're basically doing what we've been saying. 2015, Yoenis Cespedes was enough because the 2015 Mets weren't very good. That's a fact. Did you look at that lineup? A broken down David Wright, Lucas freaking Duda, Daniel Murphy, who had a great postseason, but it's still Daniel Murphy, Ruben Tejada at short, a broken brown David Wright at third. Like, come on. Juan Lagares in center field. I mean, it wasn't very good. The lineup wasn't good. We knew the rotation carried him. But again, what you needed going into the 2016 season was more than just Yoenis Cespedes. Improve on the lineup, knowing that the rotation was what the potential of them being. Yet you didn't do that because you relied on the young arms, and to shut up fans, what the Mets love to do, they would shut you up by getting that one player that you wanted and not do anything else. Well, we got you Yoenis Cespedes. What else do you want? Like, that's the issue, and that's a problem. Let's see. Grant, Daniel Murphy was clutch. I agree with that. But again, Daniel Murphy wasn't a great player. Like, he was great in that postseason, and then the Mets let him go. Like, see the problem? That's 2016 in a nutshell. Why would you let Daniel Murphy go? Oh, right, because he was a net negative, according to Gary Cohen. If Daniel Murphy figured out what he needed to do at the plate to become not just a really good average hitter, but have some power too, and we've seen it with the Nationals for a couple of years, he killed the Mets. What if Daniel Murphy was on the Mets those years? Maybe 2016 would have been different. Maybe we didn't have to wait until Connor Gillespie to hit a home run to center field to lose the wild card against the Giants. Why couldn't we score? Because the lineup sucked. Because 2015, the lineup sucked. Like, we forget about that. Like, yeah, Madison Bumgarner was on the mound, but you couldn't scratch one run. It's not like the Giants scored 50 runs. It took Connor Gillespie to hit a home run when the Giants had other bats in a lineup that could clearly do more damage. Like, this is where we are. River, I understand the names you just put saying it's a good offseason, right? But I'm sorry. Clay Holmes isn't a starter. You signed him as a starter who has been a reliever the majority of his career. Frankie Montas hasn't been good since 2022. Sean Manaea, I like that signing. But don't give me that Sean Manaea you can just throw him as the ace for a guy who broke down last year when he hit that 170 inning mark. and claim he's going to do it this year. Yeah, maybe he gives us the innings, but do we think he can do it as good as he did? If he did, great. That's what I want. But to have put all your chips onto the table that Manaea will do that, it's still a lot of hope. Juan Soto is we all know that's a great move. But you have to also complement that. We're still after Juan Soto, we still talked about the Mets getting one more bat, if not two, in the lineup. Why is that? Because we know what they need. Like, that's why the Mets tried after Teoscar Hernandez, Jock Peterson. They might be going after Anthony Santander in Profar. Why is that? Because they want an extra bat. Maybe even two. Like, what have they would have done if Teoscar Hernandez, they were able to get Teoscar Hernandez? They probably would have still got one more back because they were still in talks with Alonso regardless of the Hernandez signing. They were going after Hernandez and Jock Peterson along with still negotiating with Pete Alonso. So they're looking for two bats. That's obvious. And there's still a possibility they can still get Profar and Alonso, or Profar and Anthony Santander, or Profar and Bregman. They could do that. I'm not going to say Pete Alonso puts us over the edge with Soto. Listen, bring back Pete Alonso and let's go to battle. Right? I mean, it's a better lineup than last year, clearly. But there's too many Mets fans that think that it's Pete Alonso or bust. Like, don't even play the season if you're the New York Mets because Pete Alonso not on the Mets anymore. How can we even watch this team and think they're going to win? Rockabye baby. Hey, what's up? Dwayne, I agree. Stearns hasn't won anything. But again, I don't like to judge Stearns on Milwaukee when he never had the money from the owner to add on to a very good team. He wasn't able to add a tremendous amount of salary to get better at the deadline. So it's hard for me to judge what Stearns did in Milwaukee because he might have wanted to make that deal at the deadline that could have made their lineup better or their rotation better or their bullpen better. The owner never gave him that luxury. So I can't say that. Like, unfortunately. I'd like to, but I can't. Dwayne, for one season. But again, there's the argument on both sides where we know all of us knew that 2024 was supposed to be a transition year, an evaluation year. So when the Mets started winning and started, making a run and the deadline came, I see why Stearns didn't want to give up prospects because he was still evaluating the farm system. He just got to the Mets. But when the Mets were 5 games back in the wild card, there was a lot of fans, and some of you are here right now, that said, I'm not giving up prospects right now just to hope for a wild card. But a lot of Mets fans turned around when we were in NLCS, couldn't pitch against the Dodgers. Would have been nice to have Blake Snell or another starting pitcher that actually was good, right? So perception matters. When you're 5 games behind the wild card, of the last wild card, not a lot of fans are going to say go for it and trade prospects for the hopes of making the playoffs. But when you did and you're in the playoffs and you saw the flaws and the problems that were coming, because we've seen it throughout the playoffs, it would have been nice to actually make those moves, or at least one of those big moves that you could have helped this team. So that was the issue. Fireblazing, I agree with you. I believe that Manaea can be a damn good number 2. Right? And there's some people that say, oh, well, you don't really need an ace. You're so crazy with frontline starters. Again, it bit us in the ass last year. We had nobody that can hang on to give us what we needed as a starter because we were hoping guys to do it who haven't done it in years or never done it in their career. Like, that's the issue. Like, I think if Stearns was here 3 years already and last year happened, maybe he would have went for it, evaluated, would have been over. That period would have been done, right? You can't be evaluating this offseason. There's no need to evaluate. You don't get Juan Soto and tell your fan base last year that patience for 2024, this is an evaluation year. This is the transition year, but next year is going to be our year we go for it. That was said by David Stearns and Steve Cohen publicly. And you're not doing any, again, the offseason is not over. Again, please let me eat my words before the season starts. But as of right now, January 19th, less than a month away before spring training starts, pitchers and catchers, and basically a month until full workouts. There's a lot to be desired in this lineup, to be quite honest. This roster, in my opinion. So, guys, there was a lot to talk about today. Football is going to start in about a half hour. I know there's a lot of people in this chat that their teams are not in it. But again, playoff football is always fun to watch. We had a shocker last night with the Commanders beating the Lions in not even dramatic. It was a beatdown. So, with that said, guys, we started it, the stream with the Tanner Scott news and me talking about the Dodgers for a good half hour. King Stu, hope. Lovely word in New York Mets land. I did a video about the Pete Alonso situation. Guys, check that video out. I go into more depth and where I got my source, because people are saying, where'd you get your source from? I didn't get a source. There's two guys that are known writers for Sports Illustrated and Fansided, both MLB insiders, wrote this about Pete Alonso and the New York Mets. Go check out that video. Again, I'll briefly talk about it with Pete Alonso. The Mets and Pete Alonso are still engaged in talks. I go into detail, a hell of a lot more detail, and explain why that is. And I actually show the source on the screen. Like, I read it word from word. I didn't say this, just say, oh, there's a source out there, blah, blah, blah. It's on the screen. And I read it word from word. So with that said, guys, check out that Pete Alonso video I just posted about 2 hours ago. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to Mets Talk Live right here on the channel on this football playoff Sunday. Apologize again for the graphics and the lack of topics because of the download situation with StreamYard. Just wasn't working for me. So with that said, guys, have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Let's go Mets, and let's hope the Mets make more moves to get better. Have a good day, guys. Let's go Mets, and I'll see you next time, guys. Good day.
City lights in the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Creepers from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night.